For decades, we've been following the U.S. dietary guidelines, and we are just as sick as we can be, more fat, more diabetes than ever before. Why does the government recommend for us to eat low-fat dairy? And don't they understand how bad the message is?
The reason that we're told to eat low-fat dairy is that those caps on saturated fat, which tell us to limit the percent of calories that we get from saturated fats to 10%, no more than 10%, that cap still exists. And the reason that it still exists is that they still have not reckoned with all that science that I just described, funded by the government on tens of thousands of people. They have not reckoned with that science. Why have they not done so? Very likely because there's a huge quantity of corporate interests that are trying to maintain that saturated fat limit. There are decades of university professors who've invested their careers in telling us that saturated fats are bad for health. There's a series of reasons, but they're not about science. They're about politics and the influence of corporations. That is why we're continued told to eat low-fat dairy. And it's not really the government's fault. The government, in order to create its dietary guidelines, which are issued every 5 years and tell all Americans how to eat and are highly influential, even though you may not think they are. We can talk about that later. But they appoint an expert panel to review the science. And they choose a panel of people, whether they know it or not, that come from the same institutions that are, believe in the status quo and are there to sort of rubber stamp the status quo, and they do not choose scientists who might challenge that. So, they
did release the guidelines on cholesterol in 2015, right?
That's true.
Okay.
That was a good step forward.
That's a good step.
That's right. So the American Heart Association in 2013 and the U.S. dietary guidelines in 2015, they both dropped their caps on dietary cholesterol. They did it without any fanfare. They barely told anybody. There was no press release. There was no scientific explanation in their expert documents to say the science used to be this and now it's this. Nothing. It was just like a one line saying we no longer support these caps, which, by the way, have been the cornerstone of our dietary advice for decades and decades. In the American Heart Association document, it's even worse. It just says cholesterol caps, insufficient evidence. And this is after 60 years of telling Americans don't eat eggs, don't eat chocolate.
They removed it from their website. They just took it out of their website, and that's it, right?
Yeah. No announcement to the public. No. Sorry, we got it wrong.
No media headlines. No coverage from all the big, media.
Long on cheese. You could have had, omelets with egg yolks in them. When the nutrients in an egg, they're all in the yolk.
Right. Oh my gosh, I cannot tell you how many egg white dishes I had in my life. Oh my goodness. Surprised I'm not dead. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the Nutrition Coalition, and especially in how they can change or help influence the revision of the guidelines.
Yeah, so the Nutrition Coalition is a group that I founded in Washington, D.C. It's a non-for-profit group. It receives no industry money. It has no industry backing. Our goal is to change our dietary guidelines, our nutrition policy. Why? Who cares? Nobody goes to a .gov website to find out how to eat. That's true. But the dietary guidelines are incredibly influential, and they really reach out to each and every American in ways that are invisible to us, but they do. So the advice that you get from your doctor, nutritionist, dietitian, nurse, every single healthcare practitioner on the front lines is required really to deliver to you the guidelines, right? What are the guidelines? The guidelines, if you're eating a diet that's high in fruit and vegetables, high in healthy whole grains, low fat dairy, lean meat, that's the guidelines. So that's the advice that you're getting. That's what informs food in schools for your kids. That's for
nursing homes, military,
nursing home, for your elderly relatives. For the military, it has a 14% obesity problem, and they're exercising. Yeah. Why are 13% of them obese?
Well, they're not eating right.
The guidelines, and because those men and women and serving in the military, they go into the mess hall, and what do they see? I've been told this by people and seeing pictures of it, over a huge vat of pasta, which, remember, your body understands as sugar. There's a green dot that says go. This is good fuel, energy fuel. And over the meat, there's a red stop dot saying this food will drag you down. Even though one is replete is 100% carbohydrates, and the other has 0 carbohydrates and just fat and protein. So, it really is an amazing situation. So the guidelines are hugely influential, whether you know it directly or not. And they need to change because they are influential and because they are wrong. They're a one-size-fits-all diet. They tell all Americans to eat over 50% of our calories as carbohydrates, right? So the guidelines started in 1980. Here's the picture of obesity in America going along like this. In 1980,
straight up.
Upwards. What happens in 1980? The dietary guidelines start.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, all Americans are told to eat 7 to 11 servings of bread every day. Well, just as grains efficiently fatten cattle, grains will
do it for
humans, right? So, so they're wrong because they were based on weak science, and they're wrong because they've never incorporated this more rigorous science that we've talked about, especially on saturated fats. And the science has been cherry-picked, and now it's been institutionalized in a way that is wrong. And that would just be a sort of tragedy of science, except for it has this enormous impact on the public health. We're told, oh, America doesn't follow the guidelines. We're fat and sick because we eat too much junk food and we're too lazy and we don't get out and exercise enough. But none of those claims, when I believed all that. And then I went and dug into all the science and the numbers, and I realized actually none of that is really supported by any of the numbers that I could find. If you look in every category of food, according to the government's own best available data, Americans really have followed the guidelines. Red meat consumption since 1970 down 28%, beef down 34%, whole milk down 79%. This is consumption availability numbers. And we've increased fruits and vegetables by 20 to 35%. We've increased grains by nearly 30%. In every category you can look at, we have done everything that we're supposed to do. Vegetable oils up by almost 90%, while animal fats have declined by 27%. We did that. We lowered saturated fat and increased vegetable oils. Yeah. And in terms of physical exercise, in 2005, barely 40% of Americans met the federal exercise guideline goals. Now more than 50% do. So we've been increasing our exercise, and yet we just get fatter and sicker. Yeah. So the alternative explanation is that there's something, it's not that we're failing to follow the guidelines. It's that there's something wrong with the guidelines themselves. Right. Following the guidelines does not lead to better health.